all for being here. Wow, this is a great crowd. This is really good, and congratulations, Ryan, for pulling this together, and all the folks who helped. And every single one of these people has been on my radio show, so I have to give my show a plug. If I didn't do that, Peggy would yell at me when we were done here. So the Mike Nowak Show with Peggy Malecki, Sunday mornings 9 to 11 on WCGO 1590 AM and 95.9 FM. We also are on all the podcast platforms pretty much throughout the visible universe and on Pluto. So you can get our show there. What? Which is a planet? It's a dwarf planet. It's a, we're going to have that argument here. And of course, this is the kind of stuff we talk about on the show. And I want to actually call attention, because some of the folks in the room just a couple of days ago were at the Chicago Botanic Garden for the Illinois Landscape Contractors Association Impact Conference. And I know some of you have participated in that in the past. And there were about 280 people there, which is a great crowd. And the whole idea is how to treat the earth more gently if you're a landscaper. I mean, we do it as individuals, or we want to do it as individuals, but I helped start an organization called the Midwest Ecological Landscape Alliance in 2002, and we thought at that point, wow, we're going to change the world. But we haven't. There's still too much of the same old, and a lot of that spills over, as you guys know, into lawn care. And I think it might be because a lot of landscapers start off with a lawnmower in the back of their truck, driving around, and then they learn about other things. Maybe how to plant a tree. Please don't use volcano mulch. Please don't do that. And other things. But we're here today to talk about the lawn part of it because, what is it, 45 million acres? But I also know that they love their lawns. So I also say, if you're going to do it right. Do it smart. And that's what these folks on stage are all about. So I'm going to start with Chip because he's the star of the panel. I mean, he got flown in, and I was listening to your seminar today. I caught part of it, and something I was struck by, and I mentioned this to. Oh, wait a second! I got to introduce our panel before we do that. Ryan Anderson, of course, from Midwest Grows Green. And let's congratulate Midwest Grows Green on its 4th anniversary. Go to their website, go to their Facebook page. Probably the easiest thing you can do is just give the Facebook page a like. Show them that you're out there and you're supporting them. And then there's Chip Osborne from Osborne Organics. He's probably the preeminent practitioner of natural or organic lawn care in America. Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Marc Wise, co-founder, or founder rather, of Greenwise Organic Lawns and Landscapes, and we've had conversations. I can remember one conversation that we had. I was sitting in a parking lot in a Jewel, and he was talking to me about organic lawn care and showing his passion. But how long have you been doing this? Grab your mic. Got to use that too.
Thanks, Mike. We started in 2007, so we've been at it about 12 years now. So
12 years. All right. And then on his left is Steve Neumann, and he and I have had go around. Steve actually introduced me to core aeration. I'm going to tell the story. Why don't you grab the microphone from Mark? I will tell the story. I'm going to bust myself here, okay? How many of you have actually worked a core aeration machine? You need to try it if you have. Oh, good. So you people know. You don't run the machine runs you. And we were doing it for a friend's place, and this was when I was working at WCPT. And he was living in Indiana, and he had heard me talking on the radio about natural lawn care, and he says, we're going to do it. We're going to do it in my house. And I said, well, you got to do it right. We're going to bring Steve in, and we'll do the core aeration. We'll do the overseeding. We're going to do it right. So, Steve, we're going to do a little video about this of Mike running the core aeration machine. So Mike gets behind the core aeration machine and immediately runs into the neighbor's car. All right?
Through the lawn, into the driveway, into the car.
Yeah, it was like... So I always say, let the professionals do it. All right? Since that time. If you can't laugh at yourself, I don't know. So how long has Logic been around?
We've been in business for 11 years.
So you got 11 years, 12 years. And Chip, how long have you been doing this?
I've been horticulture for 47, and
Hold that right up here, right up.
Horticulture for 47, and natural alternative management for about 22.
Okay. So good for you. And yet, I'm not sure that the message is getting out. Okay.
It's slow. It's slow.
Why? Okay. Well, I was talking about in 2002
Yeah.
when we started Mila. He said, okay, we're gonna let people know that there's a different way, a better way of doing it. And for years now, I've talked to people like Steve and Mark, and they say, it's tough because we're up against client expectations, and that always seems to be the big roadblock. Do you see that as well, Chip?
It's all about communicated expectation. So I'm not a landscape contractor, so I don't do individual residences, but oversee 4 or 5 large estates and professional baseball stadiums at the AA level and all of that. So it's all about expectations.
Mm-hmm.
So my sort of buzzword is we manage to communicated expectations, and they can be here or they can be way up here, and it's 2 different ways to manage. So, I appreciate all that you guys go through, because on a day-to-day basis, you're faced with that expectation as communicated to you by a wide range of clients.
All right. And you guys, start. You've got the mic, Steve. So how do you manage expectations?
Yeah, it's a lot like what Chip said, and we work with residential clients and with a wide variety of expectations. And then we've got high schools, middle schools, elementary schools, and municipalities. So you can imagine the expectations. So it's definitely sitting down with the client, understanding the expectations, educating, talking about dandelion season, and that dandelion season will end.
It never ends. Come on. You know that. Never.
So yeah, it's communication and education.
Mark? Hand him the mic.
Yeah, I mean, expectations are really difficult. And as a residential landscaping company, you sort of have there's alternatives, and our program's customizable. But ultimately, we're setting an expectation. And I think by setting it right off the bat, rather than letting the client set the expectation and letting them really know the differences between maybe a synthetic program and organic program, that helps. So I think being very clear in how you communicate those expectations is important, and then just aligning. But speaking to what you were saying earlier about the industry not really moving, that really hasn't been the experience we've seen at Greenwise. I mean, Greenwise has grown consistently every single year by at least 20%. So we're seeing the demand. We maintain about 700 clients organically, and I think that with the right marketing, we couldn't keep up with it. So I think that the demand is definitely out there. The word is out there because of people like Chip and Steve, and that it's really getting the industry on board to support it.
Well, okay, I want to follow that line of thought. Why then, and this might be different on the East Coast, because I have seen, I had a sponsor on my show, Eco Lawn, about 9 years ago. And they were on for a couple of seasons, and then they bailed on me, and she's really nice, I like her, and she said, Mike, I just can't sell this in the Midwest. She said the coasts, they pick up on this, and they're all for alternative lawns, but I can't sell it in the Midwest, and so I'm sorry. Chip, what do you see along that line?
Well, there's no question that the origins of a lot of this were back in the Northeast, in eastern Massachusetts, Connecticut, Westchester County, and New York. But I've always identified the upper Midwest as an area of more than a passing interest. Actually, from that area in the Northeast, as it began to move, it moved out here a little sooner than it even did down New Jersey and through the Mid-Atlantic. California is an IPM state, so California was slow to adopt true organic practices like, we're talking about here, but emerging now. I think the exciting thing for all of us, whether it's at the level that I work or where you work, I think we are in a period where the next 5 years are going to be huge, because I think we've peaked. We're not peaked.
You think we're getting to that point now?
We're pushing up to the top of the mountain here, and it's just going to go up from there. So everything I see nationally points to a huge push in the next 2 or 3 years.
Because my next question is to take on your comment there, Mark, which is to say, why aren't there more companies like yours here in Chicago? There's a handful, basically, that do what you do.
I think that, was that to Steve?
No, go ahead, Mark. You can address it, and then Steve can if he wants to.
I mean, I think Steve can attest to this. It's not easy to run a landscaping company. And there's a lot of moving parts. And so, it takes a lot of hard work and passion to make it happen. Additionally, a lot of the landscaping companies that exist are two different breeds. There's a lot of old school companies that have been around for many years that really can't rebrand themselves or make the change in their program. So they're just not changing. And then there's smaller companies that just don't have the education to focus on turf care. They're mowing companies mainly that buy a product from a vendor. So for those companies, there'll need to be policy shifts ultimately to get them to change out of what they know to they're not going to change and move away from their path of success that they know for the most part. But then there's pioneers like Steve and Greenwise who are saying this is the only way we're going to do it, and we brand ourselves that way. And there's a huge demand out there ultimately, and there's people like Chip who are pioneers. And I think that the market is moving, and it's moving quickly, and it's because of the work that people like Chip do. I mean, Chip is maintaining professional athletic fields 100% organically. And when you see,
which is where you should be doing it. I'm sorry, if you've got your kids on a field, you don't want to be putting synthetic pesticides on there. You want to be, you want to do it right. You want to keep them safe. That's a no-brainer to me.
Or if you're paying them $20 million a year. Kidding. Blue Jays or whatnot. But I think that, if you can be successful in a professional athletic field or maintain 700 clients and you're showing that success to the marketplace, people know that organics isn't, it used to be like, does it really work? Is it really available? Are they really organic? But now I think that it's a tried and true in the marketplace, and that demand is really catching up. And I think what you'll see is in the next generation, the millennial population that's now buying homes, they're a lot more aware, environmentally aware, and going to want organic lawns for the most part. So I think that this shift has been building for a long time, and it's going to take, pioneers to push it over the edge ultimately. But I think the demand is there to support
I hope you're
it.
right. I really do. Steve, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I wanted to add, so all of our municipality accounts and our school accounts have all come from organizations like Go Green Wilmette or Go Green Park Ridge, the activists and Ryan. So it was written into the RFP. If it's not into the RFP, it is not happening. So once it's written in there, then our bid looks completely different than the conventional bids, and we're winning the bids. So I don't think, I'm not as optimistic as Mark that it's shifted, but it's all of the groups that are here, that is making the difference. Because then we get the account, and then I go out and meet with the facility manager, and the facility manager tells me on day one, make sure there's no dandelions here. I know we're going organic. So the facility managers, we have to kind of back into, build trust with, and that becomes, I know going in now that my job is to start building trust with the facility manager. I'm going to make their job easy, and we're going to make the turf look great, and it's a process, and it requires a lot of communication. But wanted to make it super clear, because the people making it happen are in this room. that's how we're getting these contracts. That's what's shifting it. And the more and more examples we have, and Ryan's got so many more than he used to, is going to keep that trend going.
I tell you what, Ryan, why don't you hand that microphone over there, and I'll share mine with you, because I got a feeling that, when we start shouting at each other, we're going to each.
We're friendly competitors.
Yeah, I know you are. Have you ever told somebody or asked one of your clients? I'm not in the business, so and I get to be a loose cannon because I have a radio show. And what I want to say is, ask a client is, what's wrong with the dandelion? I mean, because what's the answer to that question, Chip?
Well, it really is, again, that expectation. And, when we think about these expectations that we have for the American lawn, where was that expectation created? The early 1950s by an industry that wanted to sell product. Prior to that, there was nothing wrong with white clover. It's really a good guy. And I mean, I have a gun to my head if there's too much clover in the land, but I'm not the guy that's still going to say it bad. It's a bad guy. Same thing with a dandelion. Dandelion's a frontline pollinator. It's food. So the idea that we have an American lawn, we have an expectation that was created by an industry. So part of this, as the science, and what we do now with natural turf management, organic lawn care, whatever we want to call it, large scale, small scale, it's all science-based. It's not pie-in-the-sky organics the way we were branded 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. But the idea, along with that technology and along with the ability to produce some of these monocultures of non-native species that, are required to do from time to time, there's absolutely nothing wrong with the dandelion and that expectation. And I think we have to really just kind of come to a realization that our perception of the American lawn is no longer sustainable moving forward 50 years into the future. Because see what's happened in the last 75 years. This sort of little blip in time in 75 years, the damage we've done to rivers, to groundwater, to human health. All of those unseen costs that have nothing to do with the cost comparison, how much is a conventional program versus organic program, all those unseen costs. So collectively as a society, yes, we can go manage organically. We can manage to high expectations. But the bottom line is a lower expectation absolutely should never be considered to be bad.
Well, and it was Bill Scheffler at Pure Prairie Organics who said to me, look at the soil around the dandelion root. And you've never seen such good soil.
That's the best soil in the yard, absolutely.
Exactly. And the other thing is, weeds as messengers. Don't shoot the messenger. And the weeds, as you guys know, and I'm sure you talk about it often and feel free to address it, is that different weeds, and I'll use air quotes here, and you're never supposed to use air quotes on television, weeds are simply telling you about your soil. So a dandelion might point to a calcium deficiency, and clover a nitrogen deficiency, and creeping Charlie to compaction and poor drainage, that sort of thing. And yet, it's let's kill the messenger. Let's shoot the messenger. I assume you guys address your clients that way and let them know about that.
I think that, I'm going to tie it back to demand. We have a clientele that's pretty much on board for the most part. And I'm seeing that, yes, we get complaints about weeds here or there, and some weeds are more aggressive than others. And, there are times that you need to contain weeds. And, a lot of that is based on expectation, and part of it is protecting the integrity of the lawn. But I really like something that Chip said early on, or just a minute ago. Chip was talking about how we developed this obsession with a perfectly green lawn, and it was based on someone wanting to market a product ultimately. And I think that that's a really, really important thought and segment. And I think that if we can apply that to organics, someone said, here's a product, let's create a lot of information around that product. Let's tell people that a perfectly green lawn is the most desirable thing out there, and let's sell it. And, marketing is education out there, and does influence perception. And so I think that the power and the ability as an organic lawn care company or a landscaping company or, a consultant in the industry is that you can begin to reframe that perception of lawns in general. And I think that for me, when I see a little bit of clover, I'm like, okay, my daughter can go play on that lawn, or my kid can go play on that lawn, and I know it's safe. When I look at a lawn and I don't see a weed, I don't want to go on that lawn. Like, my perception has changed. And if I can pass that message along, I think that we can create change a lot faster.
I think one thing happened, and I think I might have stolen this from you, Chip. I don't remember exactly because I use it in my garden talks now. The world changed in 1967. Is that you?
That was me.
That's you. Good. I'm glad. Now here's the source. And what I do is I show them a photo from 1967. What do you think it was? Clover? Nope. It was the Masters Golf Tournament was broadcast in living color for the first time. And every guy in America said, I want that. They can't have that. Of course, they also want the azaleas, but they're not going to get those either if you live in Chicago, that's for sure. But it's about perception, and it's about, I always call it brainwashing, because I think the American public has been brainwashed for about 60 years about what the perfect lawn is, and we know there's no such thing as a perfect lawn. Now we need to undo the brainwashing, move forward, and let folks know that there's actually good in diversity in your lawns, and dandelions and clover and other so-called weeds are diversity in your lawn.
Yeah, absolutely right. But you have to embrace genetic diversity. And the minute we become exclusionary and try to continually grow these massive monocultures, there's no good that's going to come from that, over the following generations. So we've been all these years where we've been taught that we have to manage a non-native as a monoculture, and that's what our turf grasses are here in the upper Midwest. And they never were managed as monocultures in their origins in Western Europe and the British Isles. Not that we're going to go back and completely, back off and not manage at all, but there's a happy balance that we can certainly strike to meet a very pleasing aesthetic, but you don't have to strive for chemical-created perfection.
All right, are there any questions in our audience here? Oh, of course, Julia. Come on, I'll hand the microphone to you.
I'm starting to work with a little group called the Voice of the People here in the city, and we're going to redo 3 of their gardens to give a better perception of the property to the neighborhood because they've had sort of a bad rap over the years since they formed in the 1970s. And we looked at the grass today, and I was going, great, clover here. And then on the other side, I went, oh, violets. So what do you do about violets?
Do you want for Larry's?
You guys want it? You're the practitioners on the ground.
I can start there. The violets are the number one. Creeping Charlie kind of got the name of the hardest weed, but it really is wild violets. We have had success with chelated iron, putting it right on and kind of drenching it, and then requires follow-up 3 times. We've also, depending on the patient's, cutting out a soil profile and actually pulling out the violet and the root out of the soil profile is a great manual way, but don't try to get it out unless you get that root. But I don't know about you guys, but the chelated iron is proving successful.
I think the important question to ask is what is your expectation? Are a few violets okay in a thick, dense green lawn? Are there the resources to treat it? So it could be ultimately that, we don't care about a few violets. Let's put down a really nice grass seed and create a thick, dense, healthy lawn and outcompete the violets. Or it could be exactly like Steve said, you know what? We want a really nice lawn, and there's some natural approaches that are non-toxic out there that you can implement to take care of them.
Right. And so that speaks to this shift, because there are people that have shifted and will accept that. But then, the conventional companies still have 99% of the market share. So finding that balance to be able to solve that problem and do it in an organic and natural way is an important way to pull them down the path. And then over time, they'll get more tolerance to some of the weeds. But we've found we have to have solutions. it happened about 8 years ago. We lost 3 clients to True Green in one day. And I said, this is not going to help everybody that's trying to change.
This is not your business model, right?
And it's not going to support my business. So we had to find a way to take those people and clients and bring them along the path. So then all of a sudden, after working with us for 3 years, they're like, holy cow, lawn looks great.
I would also go into the underlying conditions. Sometimes violets indicate poor drainage or anything like that, so I would also check that.
Right, and we haven't, it has no organic amendment today, so we're going to start.
And as you know, they support fritillary butterflies.
I know.
I know, but I know you know that, Julia.
I know how to go away, but I know that we're going to allow them more on the edges, you know.
Yeah, no, and I do the same thing. You know, I'll look at a stand of violets and I go, okay, can I take out half of that and then still have a pretty good stand? Yeah. You know, there are practical solutions. Chip, did you want to address this at all?
Well, one solution that I came up with, gosh, going back into like 2002, 2003, we typically know that the ideal height to mow the organic lawn is 3 inches, right? And so you get violets, and they may be in a shady-ish area, they may be in a little bit of retained moisture, but if you break that 3-inch mowing height and drop it down and cut really short, and you take out the apical meristem of the violet, which is the growth tip, 3 successive times, you will drain that plant of all the carbohydrate reserves because it keeps trying to push back up to recreate a new apical meristem, and it's using so much carbohydrate to do that, and all of a sudden it runs out of gas.
And it only takes 3 times.
Now, that doesn't happen in all situations.
No.
And everything is unique. Soils have a part to do with it, sandy versus clay, those kinds of things. But, a mechanical, way, alternative,
but it's
non-product.
that's very practical. It's a very practical bit of advice there.
So then you let the organic lawn come back up to 3 inches after you've stressed that out.
I was in a band called Apical Meristem, so it was a garage band. Were you going to say something, Steve, about that?
I was just going to say, Chip said it in a much more scientific way, but it speaks to why our chelated iron's working. Right away in March, at the end of March, we're looking for the wild violets. We know which properties have them, and we show up, and the second the wild
You're
violet,
banging it.
boom, and it has no chance to do all that stuff Chip said.
The scientist in the room, right? Did we have another question? Here you go.
So I know grass has short roots. So in some ways, I don't see it as much better than a parking lot for retaining runoff. And the Midwest in particular has, Chicago is 30 billion gallons of combined sewer overflows. Do you have any species recommendations or landscaping recommendations for holding that water and absorbing runoff?
Many, many examples of properties that were retaining water, aeration, seeding, growing good, healthy turf. Far better than a parking lot, maybe not as good as a prairie, but you can get good stormwater management and filtration with good, healthy turf.
Yeah, so there's different species of grass as well. Tall fescue has a much deeper root system, and so that if you're looking at lawn, that's one way to do it. But I think that there's many different creative ways to redirect water and retain it on site, whether it's moving it to a rain garden or a flow well basin or something along those lines, or a permeable driveway or patio. I think there's a lot of options now through landscaping, basically, to retain water on site rather to send it into the storm sewers and cause the flooding that you're talking about.
Chip, did you want to
And
weigh in?
it may be not so much that the grass is the problem, but the soil is the underlying problem. And everything that we talk about in natural management and even in conventional management should be addressed, but nobody in conventional, I won't say nobody, most people in conventional management don't pay much attention to soil. It's opening up bags, boxes, or bottles and putting it down based on the calendar that's in front of them. But if we start to focus on the microbial life in the soil, which is where everything happens, and simply do something like feed those microbes with a little bit of humic acid or a little sugar or things that get that really working, that in itself is going to loosen up soils. Even your clay soils here allow the root penetration to be better, and then water will be absorbed, down through there. And as the roots grow and die and break down, it creates more organic matter that holds more water. But the reason we shouldn't give up, one of the reasons we should never give up on grass, and is there too much grass in the world? Absolutely. In every talk I give, I say there's too much grass in the world and some should be eliminated. Just get rid of it. I have a client that's 10-acre property, 88,000 square feet of grass. She would never let me touch her lawn. She loved it. So I went out over a 1-year period and I ripped out 15,000 square feet of her lawn and composted it, and she never knew it. I never told her. I never asked her. I never told her. She only walks on it twice a year with me. We went out and took a walk, and she said, "What's different?" And I said, "Oh, you have 15,000 square feet of grass and 15,000 more feet of gut." She loves it. She thinks it's her idea. Tear out more. But the idea that grass, when we're talking about global warming, and when you tie all of this back to global warming, think of the amount of carbon dioxide we can pull out of the atmosphere through the blade of that grass plant in the process of photosynthesis, the most basic process, because there is no food in a fertilizer bag for any plant on the planet. So we're simply using fertilizer as a catalyst, a raw material. And you put fertilizer down, the grass gets greener. But that's that green chlorophyll, energy from the sun, carbon dioxide and moisture. CO2 goes right in the grass plant, is turned into carbohydrate. 80% of that carbohydrate goes into the root, and half of that goes into the soil and is sequestered as carbon. And that's really where we're going. Instead of focusing continually on CO2 emission reduction, which we'd still need to do, but now focus on the natural landscape and getting rid of synthetic chemicals, getting rid of that synthetic product where it takes 5 tons of petroleum to make 1 ton of fertilizer, and start managing it in a non-stressful way organically, and CO2 is just going to be sequestered carbon. So in defense of the lawn, there are some good reasons where it's a valuable addition, to the landscape. But too much? Yeah, there is too much. But.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point about the biology. As we say on our show often, it's the biology, stupid. And we mean that in the nicest possible way, because we have to get away from the idea that NPK can solve all of the problems. And you guys know that because you see it every day. We have time for one more question. All righty.
So I just have a question sort of following up on the whole climate change issue, and you guys talked about messaging on, or trying to educate the public on natural lawn care, and I'm just wondering how much climate change is part of the message, and obviously Chip Osborne is making a good argument here, but I'm wondering, like, for advertising your product, if you think that would resonate with people, and if how that fits with the communications program.
My passion for organic lawn care came out of my passion for the environment. As an environmentalist, what I have found is there's a lot of, our clientele and demand comes from, actually a lot of our clientele are very environmentally aware. And they very much care about things like climate change and pollution. But the main driver is safety, health and safety. So, I think that keeping it simple in some regards and keeping the message really simple on organics about safety is really one of the most important things that can appeal to everyone. So there are some clients who are, total environmental geeks that I'd love to talk to about climate change and how organics can impact that and sequester more carbon. Yet ultimately, the focus has been on safety and health.
Yeah, same with us. We don't engage in the climate change discussion unless we're asked about it, and we have found most clients care about the health of their local community or their home, and think about lawns that way, as opposed to the climate change issue.
So just to expand a little bit, and sort of just one of the stories and things, how they present themselves. I've been working in organic and regenerative, for the last couple of years, particularly in some of the production industries, ag and cannabis and regenerative soils, and have now brought that concept to land care, that we need to leave soils better off than we found them. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Oregon and working in the I-5 corridor from Eugene down to Medford, and working with Beyond Pesticides and bringing organic land management to municipalities, and doing the city of Eugene and Lane County, and then down to Medford and golf courses in Ashland. And we were asked right up front that every time we go, and all my trainings, I did 2 trainings, I did 2 public speeches in the evening, would you please tie this all to climate change? Because all of these cities were working on climate action plans. And for them, it was so important that this discussion of organic lawn care, and I came to it exactly for that reason, for human health and safety, particularly safety of children and children's health. But over the last couple of years, it's become very real that, yeah, we need to address that, but on an equal footing, the big picture. And so that was just one of those lessons you learned, that specific ask to tie this all together to that.
All right, we need to wrap this up. Just a couple of things, and then I'm going to have you say some closing remarks, Ryan. First of all, something I heard you say this afternoon in your seminar really struck me, which was you were talking about the science of this, and you alluded to it earlier during our discussion here. But I think folks in the room need to know, and folks watching on this video need to know, that this is not the touchy-feely part of lawn care. This is the scientific part. I heard you discussing what soil is made of, 45% minerals and 25% water and 25% air and 5% organic matter. And that's the kind of stuff that they use when they go to their clients. And then they talk about the biology, and they talk about all the science behind this. In a weird way, the touchy-feely part is going to the store and buying a bag of something and say, well, if I put this on my lawn, it's going to green right up. Here we go. And we need to get away from that and understand that these are the scientists in the room. And these are the folks that are using science to make our planet healthier. So I wanted to congratulate them on that. And before I give it to Ryan, I want all of you, because we're online here, to give your websites so people know where to go when they want to look up your services. Steve?
LogicLawnCare.com.
I am Greenwise.com.
OsborneOrganics.com.
MidwestGrowsGreen.org.
MikeNowak.net. All right. Wrap it up. Bring us home.
All right.
Ryan.
I don't have much to say. Thanks, everyone, for showing up. Thanks to our panelists as well.
Oh, and the great crew here at Patagonia. Patagonia has been absolutely fabulous. Yeah. Dustin, I could see you tweaking the dials there as we were talking. And everybody else behind the scenes here moving stuff around. You guys have been awesome.
I think right before I hand it back to Ryan, a huge thank you, the effort and the work that this guy put into this.
Right, it's all about
Fantastic.
Midwest Grows Green.
Thank you, Chip, and thanks, Chip, for being here. It's fantastic to have you here for this evening, as well as with Lyle. We are going to do the raffle. Does anyone want last-minute raffle tickets before we do that raffle?
We don't need to do this on Facebook, so why don't we go? We'll say goodbye on Facebook. Everybody say goodbye, Facebook.
All right.